Welcome back, students. Welcome back, students. Today we'll be discussing about grid layout. In the previous video, we had a discussion on Flexbox, and the day before that, we had a discussion about box layout. But today we'll be discussing about grid layout and how grid layout can be used to position items in a web page. Now, grid layout and flex layout, we'll be comparing both of them. And there are certain properties which are dedicated for grid layout, and there are certain properties which are totally different. And we already saw in flex layout, flex blocks, right? So let's start with grid layout today. Now, as you can see that on the right hand side, the image is depicting all that generally we will have a row column wise distribution of elements here, and grid is somewhat different from flex in this format that Flexbox generally performs properties, provides us properties for with operations maximum, but this grid layout can be used for both width and height properties. So that is one of the key things which we'll follow today. Now, both of them are somewhat similar, Flexbox and grid, and both are display types. And in order to activate them, we need to specify them in the container element only. The container element only by the display property, we have to specify how it is going to be displayed. Either it will be displayed in a flex or it will be displayed in a grid, that is to be specified in the container element only. So that is one of the things, key things which we have to do here, similar to Flexbox. Okay. Now, both of them, that is Flexbox and Gridbox, are alternative ways of arranging elements in a CSS layout format. Now, both have their own property sets, both have them or their own format of usage. But the key thing here is we need to understand the layout designing in both Flexbox as well as Grid and pick the most appropriate one as per our requirement. So there may be certain projects where you find Flexbox to be the easiest alternative, and in other examples, maybe you will feel like Grid is the most perfect alternative here. So depending upon that, you either will be selecting Flexbox or the Grid format of the layout. Now it totally depends on the type of orientation of the elements. Now both if we are talking about Flexbox or Grid, both will have a container and container elements. Okay, so we need to specify what type of container activation we have to do. Either we have to activate Flex or we have to activate Grid, that is to be specified in the container element only. Okay, so let's move ahead. Now the key differences. Now if we just jot down the differences here, now both have different ways of operations, right? Flexbox, Gridbox all have a different format of its usage and can be used in different ways. But the grid system is much more manual, and we have to provide generally to specify the position of a element. We need to specify many things, and Flexbox is somewhat like an automated process. It once provided, it will automatically adjust the elements as per the internal specifications. But in grid system, we have to tell more manually that what type of implementation you want to do. So automated process is a minimum here. So maximum things you have to specify on your own. That is one of the things in grid systems. But grid system tools or properties which is provided by the grid system has both for both the dimensions like width and height both. But Flexbox is totally and fully focused on the width only. So somehow Flexbox, when we try to automate the things, the best option would be Flexbox. And when we want to take command of the whole thing, and we need to specify all the sizes and shapes, dimensions on our own, Now that way grid will be the best option for us. But sometimes it's better to use grid, sometimes it's better to use flexbox. It totally depends on the element types. Now inside the element, for example, we may have a grid layout, and inside that grid layout, when I'm talking about an element, and that element can be itself a flexbox, so there can be multiple things going on. Okay, so the layout, required layout decides what type of display we would like to choose. Okay, so let's have a much more practical oriented view of this grid and how we'll be using them. That is one of the things which we will follow now. So let's go. Let me first set up the stage. So this is our old code, and let us run the HTML file so that we can have both of them simultaneously side by side. We'll go to the project section. Now currently I have not created any. Okay. Okay. So here we worked with Flexbox. Now today we'll be working with grid layout. Okay. So for grid layout, let me create a division for that sake. Okay, let me quick create a division class grid container. Class is grid item. Okay, so just copy and paste them. Okay, let us do one thing. We'll set a background to them so that each and every color background will be different. So RGB, let me choose one color for this. It's a random bytes color. So let this be copied for every item. Change the color from, so this is a reddish type, so 170. Okay, okay. So we have done with this color segments, and let me save it. I hope this will do. So this is the complete background. Okay, let it be like that, no issues. Now, let me arrange the width and height, do something on the basic color properties. So let's go back to the style. Grid container. The background color will be certain. Let me set a whitish type of color. So RGB 250, 250 and 250. Let it be a general white color background. The next thing is your margin. Generally, I always set the margin first. So let it be 10 pixels. Then let us set the height. No, we'll not set the height now. We'll set later on. Display should be set as grid. That is what is important. So as we set flex for Flexbox, similarly, when we set grid, then it will assume that the container will be a grid box, right? Okay. Now let set the items format. Now, first of all, I need the color to be black. Okay, so color, let the color be black. That will be a prominent color. Next is font size should be greater. So let it be 25 px as before. Then the text align should be center. Width and line height margin. So width can be 70 pixels if I want. Line height can be 50 pixels. And margin, as discussed, will be 10 pixels. Yeah. So once all the settings are done, now we can simply see that this is how it is looking, right? So these are the uh, 2 is where is 2? 2 cannot be found. Yeah, there is no 2 here. Yeah, now it's coming. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are all components, elements of the grid. And now we'll be one by one setting up all the different properties and important things which is required here. Okay. So let us move to the style section and we'll do the rest of the things there only. So you have the basic grid container and the basic grid item, right? Now we have already specified that I need everything in a grid layout. Now when we activate grid in the container level, there are a lot of properties which gets activated along with that, and we can now use them for our own utilizations. Now the first thing which is important is specifying the grid template column and grid template row. Now this is one of the important aspects where you are specifying the total number of grids, rows and columns of your grid. So it goes like this: grid template column. Now we can specify the size if I want. So 10 px is my first column size, 40 px is my second column size, and 30 px is my third column size. So you have specified three things. There is three sizes. So each and every size will represent a column. So currently what you have done, you have specified that I need 3 columns. The first column will be 10 pixels width, the second column will be 40 pixels, and the third column will be 30 pixels. Now similarly, we can also specify the grid template rows. Now I need 2 rows only. Okay, so in total there will be 6 elements, apart from which I have just specified 5 of them. So 1, 2, and 3 will be organized in the first row, and 4 and 5 will be organized on the second row. Now the size which I decide here is 50, is the row size of the first row, and 150 pixels for my second row. Now here there are certain haphazardness which we are seeing. Now if I refresh, then you can see that somehow it is not fulfilling what it is about to do. Now the full area, the complete area is not utilized. Number one, the column sizes are very small. 10 pixel is the first column size. Obviously, the complete columns from start till end, everybody will share the same size. Now, if I talk about the second column, so here, now if I don't have the sixth element, therefore this is not overwritten here. So this is the width which you are getting for the column width. Okay. So the size which you are specifying here, it totally is following its own rules. It doesn't have any equidistant specifications. So specifying a size is actually not the thing which we should do. Now, if we instead of specifying the size, it should be better that we specify auto here. Now, auto is something which says use up whatever size you have. So when you specify auto in the column segment, now it is assuming that whatever size length I would have, I'll divide it into 3 columns. So now it will get automated, and automatically it will be equally spaced. Every column will have the equal space. And similarly here also, if we say, okay, now let us first run it once. Now here you can see that the column has been equally spaced, but the row is not. Row is not covering. Why? Because for one it is 50, another one for it is 150. So it's better to set the auto specification here also. So auto and auto. So number of times you are specifying auto is the number of rows and number of columns you want to be, the segment to contain. So this is one of the prime things which will help to organize your components inside a grid. So grid template column and grid template rows. These are the two important aspects which we have. Apart from this, now it is important here that we should specify the content. Okay, justify content. Do you remember in the container when we are talking about Flexbox, we talked about justify content and align items, align content. So these are the two things which we should use here in order to do the same. For example, if I say justify content, now here there are certain different property values which you can use here. The first thing is center. Save and just see. Automatically it will get centered, right? The complete thing will get centered. Second option is start. Just start. Okay, flex start is something which is for Flexbox. So everything will come on the start. Okay. Similarly, we can specify it as end. It will come on the right hand side. Now, apart from this there are two different justifications which is possible only in grid layout. The first is space around. Now this is something which we got in Flexbox. The same thing goes here. So it is now uniformly distributing it, but the space which you are getting here is around, that is from the start, in between, and the gap is not of the same size. Now there is another way of using it. Instead of space around, you can use space evenly. Now when I save it and run the code, this will get evenly distributed. Now here evenly means exactly even values. So space around and space evenly will somehow give the correct output, but it's better to use space evenly instead of space around, because that may get confused with the flexbox types, right? So that is one thing which is important. Now similarly, as we are doing it with justify content, now we can do one thing more, and that is called as align content. Now align item is something which is for the flexbox, and align content is something which is for your grid. Now before I specify align content, let me specify the height here. So, and one thing more, this align content is not for the container. So this will be, let the height be, what we can do, 500 pixels. Okay. Align content is something for, sorry to say, but it's for container only. So align content. Now here also we'll have start, end, center, but the better option is always space between. So we just save it and run the code. So now you can see that elaborately it has spaced in between, and automatically it has removed the top and bottom spaces. So better option, even if we are using between, will be evenly. So both justify content must also be evenly, and this align content should always be evenly. Now you can easily see that now it is separating spaces also. The space around thing, instead of space around, you should better use space evenly. So evenly in justify content, evenly in align content, both will evenly spread out the contents of your own choice. So this is one of the important features which we have, to just organize them in a general way, right? Now this is not all. There are certain more things which is to be done. Now, first of all, okay. Now, similar to this, we have row and column gaps, right? So we can specify the grid column gap and grid row gap. This is also important, but for this we'll just remove the evenly spread out contents here, or simply we'll make it a comment. Okay, let us comment it out, save it. So whatever is the problem, it's let this problem still be like this. Okay. So now the first thing first, grid column gap. Now grid column gap can be set as a particular size. Let's say if I say 150, pixels. So this is what I want my grid column size to be. So evenly, if the gap in between the columns is 150 pixels now. So that is how you can separate them out. Evenly, you see, justify content and align content as something which is an automated process. But if you want each and every column gap to be 150 pixels, or you want every row gap like grid row gap as 300 pixels. I'm just telling whatever I want. Okay. So I need this to be used to happen. So now you can see that the column gap is 300 pixels and the row gap is 150 pixels. Now this is one of your requirement which you can have, right? Now the way you have specified the grid column gap and the grid row gap, the same thing can be specified either directly. Like for example, I can specify grid gap, and first you specify the row gap and then the column gap. So if I specify it as 150, 300 px and space 150 px, so nothing should change. If I remove this now, or else let us extend the gap. Okay, so let me save it now and run it. So there should not be any changes. Why? Because instead of specifying them separately, we have decided to specify it in a single go. So grid gap 30 px is the row gap and 150 px is the column gap. Okay. Now there is one more thing, that is when we talk about the positioning of an element in a grid, it may take up more than one grids. Okay, it may take up more than one columns. So for every uh, 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 for a specification, for example, I need to specify for the first one. Okay, so now this particular thing which I'm doing will be a specified value, right? So for one, I would like to tell that uh, the column and row of a particular element, okay, should be specific. So for one, let me decide the grid column. Okay, so when you specify the grid column, you need to specify that the start grid line and the end grid line. So this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. Okay, the starting. So this is starting from first column line, second column line is this, and third column line is this. So I need to specify two things. Number one, start column line and end column line. So I need this to span in between. It must start from here and end at here. So automatically 2 will go here and 3 will be pushed down. Okay. So as per my requirement, let me run the code and see. 1 is starting from here, ending here, right? So this is my full length, right? Automatically the third, fourth and fifth had been pushed down. The same thing can be specified for row as well. Now here it is covering up only one row. If I want it to cover up the complete row, like if I want to tell that, okay, this is one, okay, I need to say grid hyphen row start from one and end in the third row. So there is no third row actually. I would like to say, okay, go to the second row. Okay. Let's find out what happens. Okay, it is starting at first ending at second. Okay. Let me say, okay, end at third. Now you can see that it has moved from first till end, and the spanning, the complete area, it is covering up two columns and two rows. So that is what we want to specify. So in other words, the whole thing can be rewritten in a following way. Like start from 1 and span 2. Span means if I add how many numbers? Like this is 3. So if I add 2, then obviously it will become 3. So it will like telling span 2. Similarly here also start with one line and span 2. So the output would be somewhat similar. So if I run, save and run, then also the output is same, right? So this is how we need to write down, okay, the code. Now here, whatever we are doing is based on the size of the value, okay? So the grid column and grid row is the particular row and column along with the span where I need this item to be, right? So if I remove this, automatically everything will go down, right? Okay. There is another way of writing it, and the way of writing would be using the grid area. So if I directly write as grid area, I need to grid hyphen area. I need to specify all the values in a single go. Okay. So first of all, I need to specify, okay, let this be 1. The column start is 1. The row start is 1. The column span is 2. Similarly, the row span is also 2. So this is how you will specify all the values in a single go. Okay. So if I save it and run it, there is no changes. Why? Because the same thing has been implemented, right? If I say, okay, instead of starting with 1, if I specify the value as 2, now this means I want to start from the second column, sorry, second row. So first is row, then is column, then span row and span column. So if I say, okay, no, 1, my start row is 1, my start column is 1, my span row is 2, and my span column is 2. So if I say instead of span 1, this means this will be your span row. Okay. So if I save it, you can see that it is span row. It is not covering up this part. Okay. It is staying in the same row area. So if I specify span instead of 1, if I give span 2, now this means that, okay, cover up the 2 rows span and 2 columns span. So this is what is all about in grid section. Now we need to play along with all the properties which we have learned. There are certain more properties which will come along, but now we need to focus on some of the important properties which are required for animation purposes. So I would like you all to elaborate on the types of properties which we have discussed. You can Google if you want. You can have some discussions with some other persons. But main concept here for CSS is we have shared with the basic properties. Now you need to play around with these properties and pull out the best output from your websites. I hope that you have understood this grid segment, grid layout, and basically found the difference between the three. The first is blocks layout, form of layout. Second was Flexbox. Third is grid. And now we'll be focusing on the next video, we'll be focusing on some transitions or animations, because we'll be doing some movements now. And that is the thing which we'll focus on in the next video. Okay, so thank you.